All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide, toll-free, 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X Zone Radio Show 7/24/365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. I'm still trying to get over that last interview I had with Francine Kelly. She, I don't know how to best explain it, except what can you say when somebody tells you that they're a CIA asset, that they are part reptilian, part Pleiadian. Her husband is the king of the draconian reptilian vampires who died and was cremated in 2009, but she married him in spirit in 2010, and we find him alive and well in Seattle, Washington. I think that says it all. Joining me now on the real side of reality is my good friend Howard Bloom. He is the author of The Mohammed Code, which is available at Amazon.com. His website is www.howardbloom.net. And my good friend, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thanks, Rob. It's a very confusing day on which we meet. You know, we've got ISIS, which is making advances, little incremental advances on a daily basis. It's advancing around Baghdad, of all things. And there's some doubt as to whether the 60,000 Iraqi troops in Baghdad will be able to hold, and it's advanced to the center of the Kurdish town of Kobani, which has been a major focus in the press recently. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, has started killing his own Kurds instead of helping the people of Kobani. He seems to be using this as an excuse to get rid of his own opponents within his own nation, his own country. And meantime, we have a different kind of plague of an entirely different kind that seems to march in a similarly infectious manner, and it's Ebola on our hands. So there are some very strange things happening in the world, and the events around Ebola and the events around ISIS are changing hour by hour by hour as we speak.
And it seems that the airstrikes that the United States believed would kind of put a saddle on ISIS, for lack of better words, isn't working. It seems that these fighters with ISIS are, just keep on going. They must be related to the ever-ready battery bunny, because they just keep going and going and going.
Well, they've got something better as a motivator than the ever-ready bunny ever had, because they have the notion that life is short and painful, and then comes either hell or heaven, and hell or heaven are forever. So if you die on the battlefield fighting the unbelievers, you can die with a great big smile on your face because you've just purchased with your death an express ticket to paradise.
That's their belief, and there's news reports coming out that the sex trade, the sex slaves, human slavery, the annihilation of total towns, people, ladies, men, children.
The deal is there's a magazine that is put out by ISIS called Beak. The 4th issue has just come out in the last week. And it says, look, Muhammad left us this example. You fight against a group of unbelievers, you behead all the men, you take all the women and children as sex slaves. That's a holy example from Muhammad himself. And then you sell the sex slaves that you want to sell in order to make some cash. That also is an example from Muhammad. And everything wrong with the world today is because we have deviated, ISIS says, from the pattern left to us by Muhammad. We're doing the world, they say, a favor when we take these women as sex slaves or when we rape them, because we are decreasing the amount of random fornication, of the amount of illicit sex, of sinful sex in the world. And we can prove, say the folks at ISIS in their new magazine, that when you don't use the Islamic system of taking women and children as sex slaves, the amount of sin, sexual sin, in the world skyrockets.
These guys aren't playing with full decks. Like the
Well, they're playing with a very full deck because you remember their sanity is based on the worldview of the people who around you. You all share a common worldview, and to you that's sane. Well, these people not only share a common worldview, it's a worldview that goes all the way back to 622 A.D. It's a worldview that goes back 1,390 years in time. So they have an awful lot of validation for this worldview that would seem crazy to you and me, and they believe it comes directly from God himself.
From God lips to their ears, I guess. Howard, you and I have to take our first commercial break, old friend. Great having you back here in the X Zone. And how many push-ups did you do this morning at the age of 71?
I hate to admit this because I'm going to sound as delusional as the lizard lady. I did 720 without stopping at the age of 71.
God bless you, pal. I'm getting tired just listening. 721 push-ups. My friend Howard Bloom is our special guest this hour, www.howardbloom.net. He is the author of The Mohammed Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. Howard and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Don't go away. Welcome back, X Zone Nation. Howard Bloom is my special guest this hour, www.howardbloom.net. He is the author of The Mohammed Code. And if you go to Amazon.com and you buy this book, everything that is going on in this world in the Middle East will make perfect sense to you. This is the Rosetta Stone, in my opinion, of everything that is going on in the Middle East. It makes sense once you read the book. It's like, that's where this line goes to that dot, and from that dot to that dot. www.howardbloom.net, and the name of the book is The Mohammed Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. All right, Howard, let's take a look at what's happening. ISIS is proceeding towards Baghdad. There's how many, 60,000 Iraqi troops in Baghdad?
Yes, there are 60,000 in Baghdad, and the big question is whether they will stand and fight or whether they will flee the way they did several months ago. Now, Kobani has a lot to do with that. Obama, who gathered leaders from, or at least representatives from 22 nations today, and discussed with them the situation, the war against ISIS, and who's increased airstrikes. There have been 22 airstrikes in Kobani from our side in the last 2 days. Nonetheless, these airstrikes are not cutting it. And it seems that Obama and that Chuck Hagel have been hinting that Kobani is a minor thing. We have to concentrate on bigger strategic elements right now. So if Kobani falls, that's not a major problem. No, it is a major problem because the fall of Kobani will prove that even with the massive might of America, with the most sophisticated weapons it can muster, God is on the side of ISIS. Why? How do you know? Because ISIS is managing to triumph in Kobani over the American air power, and and they're looking forward. The name of ISIS magazine is Dabiq. Dabiq is a town which by now is controlled by ISIS, and it's a town in which Muhammad made a prediction. And he made a prediction that basically, as it's interpreted in the ISIS magazine, that the end of times will come when the armies of the unbelievers confront the armies of Islam in Dabiq. And the armies of Islam, the armies of the enemies, that's us, will be flying 40 banners. Or I think it might be 80 banners. One way or the other, it means that there will be an alliance with a lot of members facing down the forces of Islam. And the forces of Islam will win, and the world will end, and the only people who will be saved are the Muslims. So that's what the guys in ISIS have in their minds right now. That's what they're putting out in this magazine. They are just so hungry for America to send them ground troops that they can turn into hamburger and thus fulfill the prophecy of Dabiq. They're just waiting for it eagerly.
And of course, we all know that Dabiq is on the bird.
So, yes, the beak is on the bird, and but they haven't gotten a magazine yet called The Tail.
Oh, we digress so easily, you and I.
But the big trick here is, I think I've told you the story of once upon a time back in the 1980s, I had a Billy Joel album. I had a really advanced copy. The press hated Billy Joel. I needed to get them to admire him because he was incredible. And he
still is,
incredible. Yeah. And so I called Ken Tucker at Newsweek up in Boston and said, Ken, look, if I bring you this advanced copy of this album and we have lunch tomorrow, will you listen to it? And he said, yes. So there we are sitting at lunch, a major Newsweek writer who also works for NPR, National Public Radio, and to this very day. And Ken said, well, I think you'd discover if you sat down with anybody from any culture in the world for coffee, the way you and I are sitting at lunch today, you've discovered that their concerns are the same as yours and mine. Under the skin, we're all the same. Ken Tucker is wrong. These worldviews that I've just been explaining to you in the last 10 minutes, the idea that this life doesn't count, so if you die, killing somebody else, it's another human, but killing somebody who doesn't believe in what you believe in, you go directly to paradise. Your reward is almost infinite. It lasts forever, not to mention the 79 virgins. A belief system like that, a belief system that the end of the world will come when America sends its foot soldiers to the town of Dabiq and Islam will win, that's a different worldview. A person who has a different worldview lives in a different reality, and his logic, his reason, works in an entirely different manner than yours and mine. We mentioned in a previous talk that these guys in ISIS feel that if they behead you or they behead me, they're doing us a favor, because we're unbelievers, so we are destined to an eternity of torture in hell, and they are decreasing our tortures in hell. Plus, when we see dead, mutilated bodies in the streets, we are horrified. They feel that's glory. That's the Lions of Islam showing off their war trophies and following exactly the words of Muhammad in the Quran. This is not in a secondary book like the Hadith or Ibn Ishaq or Al-Tabari. It's right in the Quran that says, go after unbelievers wherever you can find them, strike off their heads, strike off their fingertips, in other words, mutilate their bodies, and lay in wait for them and ambush them in every siege and stratagem of war. That's a commandment from God himself, in their opinion, because Muhammad was the spokesperson for God, right? So they, when they are busy killing a bunch of men and taking women as sex slaves, and even raping them, that's in the Quran too. That's in chapter 8 of the Quran about how to divide up the loot, what you do with the women you take by the right hand. And guess what? Every woman that you rape, you're doing her a favor. Why? Because if she manages to get pregnant or you manage to get her pregnant, she's going to have a child, and because the father is a Muslim, that child will be a Muslim. What a blessing. In other words, a different way of looking at things produces entirely different results in what we call common sense.
Listen, let me ask you, why hasn't Turkey put their army against ISIS in Syria yet?
They don't see ISIS as the enemy, which is insane, because every major empire in the history of the world that has somehow strengthened an enemy of its enemy has ended up collapsing at the hand of the enemy of its enemy, the group that it strengthened. They consider the real threat to be the Kurds, the people who are fighting to defend Kobani. So for the last 3 weeks, ever since mid-September, when the attack on Kobani began, first of all, it's not just an attack on Kobani. There are 60 villages, Kurdish villages, in this particular strip along the Turkish border, strip of Syria. And the ISIS forces have taken every single one of them. That's a fait accompli a long time ago, weeks ago. Now they are trying to take the linchpin, the diamond, Kobani itself. And the Turks, or at least to Erdogan, the president of Turkey, its strongman leader, according to Erdogan, it's the Kurds who are his real enemy, because for years the Kurdish independence forces fought against Turkey for independence. Now look, Erdogan just so happens to have been, for the last few months, in peace talks with the Kurds, but he is looking forward to ISIS exterminating those Kurds in Kobani, thus getting what he regards as a terrorist group off his back. And despite the fact that he's in peace talks with the Kurdish movement, he has attacked them militarily within his own country in the last 24 hours. As far as he's concerned, ISIS is not a problem. The only problem is getting rid of Bashar Assad. Why? Because Turkey is Sunni, And Bashir Assad is in an alliance with Iran, a Shiite power. He doesn't see he's sharpening the knife that it can cut off his own head. That if the forces of ISIS can defeat American forces, coalition forces, they can defeat Turkey.
I also have been hearing today that law enforcement officials in the U.S. and Canada are concerned about homegrown terrorist attacks. And
they should be.
Yeah.
This magazine that we keep talking about, Dabiq, the magazine, but both Al-Qaeda and ISIS have their own magazines. Al-Qaeda's is called Inspire. The ISIS magazine is called Dabiq. You should see them. They are so brilliantly art-directed, it is ridiculous. And they are designed, why are they producing these elaborate, gorgeous magazines in the English language? To inspire kids in Toronto or Ottawa or Vancouver or Seattle or New Orleans to take up arms. And right now they're calling on them, don't come to see us. Kill the people in your own country. Kill the unbelievers in your own country. That's a high priority task on the to-be-done list of ISIS in their magazine at the moment.
Yeah.
Kill them wherever you find them, to paraphrase the words of Muhammad himself.
All right, so here we've got this PR campaign, this recruitment campaign that is basically being conducted and targeted towards North America via the Internet.
Yes.
Now, is this an area where governments should just clamp down and block?
I believe that government has, because my best way of researching these things for conversations like the one we're having right now is to get the magazine itself and read it from cover to cover.
Right.
But I can't find the magazine. I can find all kinds of articles from other journalists who've obtained access to the magazine, but a simple Google search is not going to tell you the URL for the magazine. Now, that's highly unusual for Google. Normally, you can find any document that's actually online that you want, and you can find it fast. But not in the case of Dabiq. Dabiq is hidden. And frankly, I haven't cracked the code of how to get at it yet. But it does. It has an article. Look, there are predictions in the Hadith, the Hadith are the eyewitness accounts of Muhammad's life. Every little incident that he participated in, everything that he ever said, that's all been compiled over 200 years after his death. It was compiled in the Hadith, and the Hadith are holy books, just like the Quran is. And the Hadith is replete with prophecies that Rome will fall to Islam. And what does Rome mean? Well, right now, in the pages of Dabiq, among other things, it means the Vatican. It means the city of Rome. They're talking in the current issue of Dabiq about attacking Catholics and every form of Christians until they break all the crosses in the world. And they're talking about flying the flag of jihad, the flag of ISIS, in the Vatican itself and from the Vatican's towers. But they're also talking about flying the flag of ISIS in the White House.
That's right.
These people, they want global control. And I know we've said this lots of times, but bear with me. The reason they can believe that they can topple the entire globe and end up with North America, South America, Asia, Europe, the whole ball of wax, not to mention Europe, which they already have half of, that is, Islam has half of it, the reason they believe it is because within 10 years of Muhammad's death, Muhammad had sent letters to the emperors of the biggest empires around. The two biggest were the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. The Persian emperor turned to his advisors and said, who the hell is this letter from?
Yeah.
And his advisors said, Your Majesty, it's from a people of sheep and camels. They're the equivalent of desert fleas. You'll never hear from them again. And within 10 years, the entire Persian Empire fell and was in the hands of jihadists, militant Muslims.
Howard, stand by, old friend. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Howard Bloom is the author of the Muhammad Code, Exonation. It's available at Amazon.com. His website, howardbloom.net. My name's Rob McConnell. This is The X Zone. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is The X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My guest this hour is Howard Bloom. He's the author of the Muhammad Code, which is available at Amazon.com. His website, www.howardbloom.net. Howard, during the news break at the bottom of the hour, you and I were talking about the morale factor when it comes to fighting. And give us your take on that. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear what you told me during the break.
Well, you have to realize, and this has been known in military strategy all the way back to the days of Alexander the Great, that any battle is a test of morale. It's a test of their morale versus our morale. And if you've got a bunch of guys who believe that if they if they manage to get close enough to you to blow themselves up and blow up 5 of us, they're going to go directly to paradise. That's the biggest prize of all. So when you have people who are willing to fight to the death because their inner calculus is radically different from ours, their morale can be very high. And because ISIS has won a nonstop string of victories, and Kobani, if it falls, and let us hope that we do not let it fall, but if it falls, will be another victory. It will raise the morale of ISIS tremendously. And what does morale do, aside from giving you the will to fight to the very end, rather than turning tail and fleeing? It brings in recruits. When other people see a winner, they want to be part of the winning team. So people have been shifting their allegiance from Al-Qaeda. I mean, already committed jihadists have been shifting their allegiance from Al-Qaeda to ISIS because ISIS is winning so many victories. And the more that ISIS wins victories, the more people who will listen in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in France, Spain, and Britain. When Al-Qaeda or when ISIS calls on them to kill as many non-believers as they can right out on the streets in front of their own homes or in the center square of their town. Morale is everything. And to have morale, you have to have something transcendent to live and die for. You have to have something that's bigger than yourself. And ISIS has it. God's own will, according to them, is to liberate the entire world so that all people everywhere can live according to the only law God has ever given to man himself, Sharia, according to the only form of government God himself has ever given, the form of government that apes the governments in Medina and Mecca in the 620s, established by Muhammad. And it's the only system that follows God's own military code. You know, pursue the unbelievers wherever you can, cut off their heads, cut off their fingertips, lay in wait for them and besiege them in every stratagem of war. Those are God's own words, according to ISIS. So they know they're fighting for God.
All right.
They know they're fighting.
In your opinion, what is their Achilles heel?
Well, their Achilles heel is that they're still in a relatively small location. General Anthony, I think his first name is Anthony Zini, has just put out a book, and he said in an interview on C-SPAN Book TV, when they're still small, use your overwhelming force. That's the time to put in 130,000 people and utterly wipe them out. Maybe that's the best strategy. I still, you know, that I had this piece in Breaking Defense, a defense publication, about 10 days ago. It said, first of all, that we have to ally with Bashar Assad. We toppled 5 dictators, or cheered on the toppling of 5 dictators, and in every single one of the countries where the dictator was toppled, with the exception of Egypt, we ended up with unbelievable chaos. We opened the way for the jihadists. We made life miserable. There's only one of these dictators left, and these dictators all established higher levels of education, higher levels of medical care. They provided freedom for women. They were secular societies. It was closer to our ideals than anything that's replaced it, and certainly than ISIS. So there's only one of these dictators left, and he is willing to put boots on the ground. He is willing to fight ISIS. His name is Bashar Assad in Syria, and he may be a monster, but as Winston Churchill said, when he had to contemplate the idea of an alliance with, of all people, one of his greatest enemies, Russia, in order to beat Germany, he said, if the devil said something against the Nazi Party, I would go up in Parliament and say positive words about hell. In other words, ally with the devil when you have to. And we may even have to ally with Iran because they can put boots on the ground. There was a town, one of the Yazidi towns, I think it was, and it had been under siege for months, and it looked like it was going to fall, and then it was relieved. Now, we pretended in our newspapers that it was relieved by Iraqi troops, our allies. No, it was relieved by Iranian-sponsored militias, by Iranian proxy militias that are based in Iraq, that are made up of Iraqi people, but are puppet-mastered from Tehran, from Iran. So we're going to have to make some strange bedfellows if we're going to get rid of this excrescence called ISIS.
Why then doesn't the coalition that has been assembled by President Obama, and he's done a great job doing this, why don't they just put the necessary boots on the ground and wipe ISIS off the face of the earth once and for all? What are they waiting for?
I think boots on the ground in the normal manner would be a mistake. I think we learned that in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is going to take over as soon as we go, and we've learned it from Iraq. And breaking defense one of my editors introduced me to another possibility, and that is we have these Marine units that are trained to use Ospreys. Ospreys are helicopters that land, planes that land like helicopters. Yep. And you can land one of those things in a parking lot in the middle of the night in Kobani, and your men can sneak out. I'm not sure how quietly, because Ospreys are probably very noisy machines, so you may lose your factor of surprise. But they can sneak out, and they can do what they need to do, and they can be back out by dawn. I strongly suspect that small, very well-targeted units are going to be able to accomplish a lot more than the old boots-on-the-ground approach.
I don't know. It's like we're fighting an enemy that is superior to everything that we're throwing at them right now.
Well, we have presumably cut down on their oil revenues with our attacks on their 20 oil refineries. That helps because they were making between $4 million and $6 million a day. We've probably cut that down to $2 million or $1.5 million a day, though there have been no assessment reports that I can find that indicate this. But yes, this is going to be a very hard enemy to exterminate. Why? Because it's a 1,390-year-old enemy. This war, I told you that in 628 A.D., so bear with me while I got repetitious, but in 628 A.D., God sat Muhammad down and unrolled the scroll of the earth to him, according to Muhammad, and said that everything that is to the west shall be yours, as far as the eye can, as far as you can possibly travel, and everything to the east shall be yours, as far as you can possibly travel. In other words, I'm giving you the world. And so the mission of world conquest has been there at the heart of Islam for a long, long time, almost 1,400 years now. It's only in recent times that it's ever died. It's only since World War I and the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire that it's momentarily died. But now it's back to life again, and it's an old and well-tested thing. We have to get used to a war that lasts a long time, but we have to not lose sight of the fact that we can't afford to lose individual battles unless there's a very, very good strategic reason. England did have to withdraw its troops from France instead of fighting to the death, or it wouldn't have had troops, and it couldn't have gone back on D-Day. So there are some larger strategic considerations that you have to make. But I, frankly, don't see that Barack Obama has yet learned military strategy and how deeply committed you need to be to win a war.
You see, he's a politician. He's not a warrior.
That's right. And so his traditional approach, was analyzed in, of all places, a Sharq al-Wasat, which is a major Saudi Arabian English-language paper. And it was a brilliant analysis, even though it was done by Saudi Arabians. And it said that Barack Obama does Chicago-style politics, meaning he gets 8 people into a room, he has them lay all of their interests, everything that they want out on the table. He looks for the intersection where they have common interests, and he cobbles together a deal that has elements from eight different elements from 8 different people. Well, he's doing that with this war, but you cannot necessarily do that with war. The coalition part, if Winston Churchill had not put together a coalition, if Winston Churchill had not brought in the United States, and which was hard, it took him a lot of work, and because we had isolationists here who didn't want to have any part of a European war, and he brought in Russia, which was hard because that was his enemy. If he had not brought those 2 players into the picture, England would be gone and Germany would be ruling the earth today. So coalition building is absolutely essential in war, but winning on the battlefield is also essential.
Here we've got every nation in the world that is being threatened by ISIS in one way or another, and yet nobody can stop them. I find there's a paradox in there, Rob. The allies that we tapped first were the Arabs, and the Arabs feel threatened by the Iranians. Remember, the Iranians are Persians. Yes.
When that Persian Empire was toppled 10 years after Muhammad's death, that didn't stop the Persians from being Persians. Yes, they converted to Islam, but there are different people from a different race with a different corporate history that goes all the way back to the first Persian empires of 600 BC. That goes a long way back. So the battle between the Persians and the Arabs is in full play right now. And the very Arab states that we're tapping to make airstrikes against ISIS have supported ISIS because they secretly are cheering ISIS on, because to them, every victory that ISIS wins is a victory for the Arabs. It's a victory for the Sunni Muslims against those damn Shiite Muslims of Iran and Iraq. So we're working with people who are almost rooting for the other side as much as they're rooting for our side. It was only 5 months ago when the King of Saudi Arabia suddenly had a big revelation and realized that the blade he was sharpening by encouraging ISIS was aimed at his throat, and suddenly started to make speeches against ISIS and get fatwas issued against ISIS. So we have uncertain enemies. And the ideal thing in building a coalition is to bring Iran in and bring the Shiites in. So both the Shiites are the natural enemies of ISIS. Why? Because ISIS wants every Shiite on planet Earth dead. Because in ISIS' view, every single Shiite is an apostate. And somebody who turns his back on his own religion or perverts his own religion, which is what the guys in ISIS think that the Shiites have done, deserved more torment and more death, even than unbelievers. So the Shiites know this. Mm-hmm. They are naturally motivated to want to exterminate ISIS. We need them on our team, even though they threaten us in nuclear ways, even though the Iranians have been working on intercontinental ballistic missiles specifically to deliver nuclear weapons in the United States for a long time. We still need them on our team.
But how do we know that they won't turn on us?
They will turn on us. We know that. We can be absolutely certain of that. So Machiavelli says, you put together an alliance, you and a bunch of tough guys, in order to knock the guy who's in charge out of power. You take over his position. The first thing you have to do is eliminate all the tough guys who were your allies, because they will feel that they're your equals and they will want to topple you. Well, we're going to have to go back to having Iran as an enemy as soon as the war with ISIS is over. But meantime, we have something bigger to achieve. That's certainly what England had to do when the Second World War was over, and when it had to go back to a Cold War with the very Soviet Union that had just helped it win a war. Sometimes you have to operate in a flexible manner, unfortunately, but you have to win. You have to be absolutely committed to winning, and we have to be absolutely committed to winning this war.
Once again, I go back to the premise that here we have a 22-nation coalition that has every bit of technology at its fingertip. Satellite technology, computer technology, the best fighting equipment that money can buy. And these little guys known as ISIS are whipping our butts.
Because the human factor is huge. Once upon a time, there was a rabble from a territory that civilized people had not even heard of. And it attacked the biggest, most sophisticated empire of its time, which was the very Persian Empire that we keep talking about. The Persian Empire had the most sophisticated military technology on planet Earth. And all this barbarian rabble had were swords and shields. Mm-hmm. That was it. Swords, shields, and morale were the only things they had. Well, the leader of this group of barbarian rabble was wise enough to know you go to the head of the group and you plunge into the battle against the enemy first, and you give your men heart. Well, that guy who plunged into the enemy lines was named Alexander the Great. The barbarian rabble was from Greece, and they defeated Alexander and his troops defeated the Persian Empire despite its incredibly sophisticated machinery, because they were higher in morale.
Is it possible that the fight against ISIS will take unconventional warfare on the behalf of the coalition?
Absolutely. Every war is a test of unconventionality. If you go into war using the conventions of your previous wars, you are likely to lose. Every war is about dirty tricks. Every war is about thinking about all the below-the-belt things that you could possibly do to do in the enemy. It's about thinking outside the box, really thinking outside the box. So Breaking Defense's idea of using these Osprey teams to make midnight raids, the way that we did on Osama bin Laden, is a good idea. We need outside-the-box ideas. You know, once upon a time, there was the invention of something radically new that looked like it could change war. It was this long tube, and you put an explosive in one end, and it would propel a stone or a piece of metal across the battlefield and penetrate the armor, pierce the armor of the other guys before they could get anywhere near you, before they could lay a glove on you. There was only one small problem. It took a minimum of 2 minutes to reload this damn thing. And in that time, you were totally vulnerable. So somebody had to invent, the invention of the weapon was one thing, but then somebody had to invent a technique for using it. And the technique he invented was, okay, line up your musketeers, the guys carrying these weapons, in 6 rows. Have the first line of guys fire, then have them step back. Have the next line of guys fire. Meanwhile, the guys who just step back and start reloading their weapons. And the next line can already have its weapons reloaded. So the one line steps forward, fires, goes back, and reloads. And it doesn't matter that it takes 2 minutes to reload, because you've got one line after another, and you've created a storm of steel on the battlefield. Reinvent the ways of using the weapons, not just the weapons themselves.
Howard Bloom is our guest. He is the author of the Mohammed Code. It's available at Amazon.com. And Howard and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Howard Bloom is our guest, and Howard, we were talking about something one of your friends said, a videographer, and
right. He's a brilliant friend, Rob, and his work. He's a fine artist, and his work is shown at the Pompidou Center, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Getty Gallery, and he makes films. And he's an extraordinarily intelligent man. And he says, Bloom, what are you doing? You're a warmonger. You keep saying all of these alarmist things. Now, if you just stopped saying these alarmist things and let them settle their own issues in their own part of the world, we'd be done with this. We wouldn't have to be involved in the Middle East. And Rob, he is so wrong, it's ridiculous. He doesn't understand that for 1,400 years, Islam has been a movement, militant Islam, jihadist Islam, not all of Islam. But jihadist Islam has been a force that's tried to take over the world, and it's done extremely well at it. It's never stayed just a local force. Within 10 years of Muhammad's death, it was already taking over empires way outside its part of the world. It wasn't just interested in settling a local problem. It was interested in settling the problem of the liberation of the world as it sees liberation. So I've given you statistics before, but they're very relevant here. Within 100 years of Muhammad's death, militant Islam, jihadist Islam, ISIS kind of Islam, had taken over a territory 11 times the size of the conquests of Alexander the Great, 5 times the size of the Roman Empire, and 7 times the size of the United States. It's the biggest empire in the history of the world. It was 13,500 miles across. And there is a historian at Harvard who bills herself as the world's leading historian on imperialism, Carolyn Elkine. And she says that no empire in the history of the world has ever taken over the hearts and minds of the people it conquered. Well, go to Malaysia and ask people what their religion is. They'll tell you it's Islam. Go to the Atlantic coasts of Africa and Algeria and ask people what their religion is. It's Islam. And that's a 13,500-mile stretch. The old Islamic empire is still alive in the hearts and minds of the people it conquered. Yes, there are many squabbles between Muslim groups, But once upon a time, we had European imperialism, and it straddled the world for 500 years. And guess what? The countries making European imperialism were at each other's throats, making war in the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, the French Revolution, war after war after war after war, and the Napoleonic Wars. It didn't matter. European expansionism, European imperialism straddled the globe. Well, that's a mere pip compared to the amount of time that Islamic imperialism has straddled the globe. Islamic imperialism has straddled the globe for almost 1,400 years. That makes the 500 years of Western imperialism look like a pip and a squeak. So we have to recognize this isn't just a local battle for some small local territory. This is a battle that, in the eyes of those who are doing the fighting on the other side, concerns the world.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, Howard. I listen to the news each and every day, and I just sit back, shake my head, and say something has got to be done, or else we're going to see a change in this world that we haven't seen since the beginning of time.
Well, I keep trying to reach, and you're absolutely right, that kind of apocalyptic nightmare can happen because the guys on the other side, the guys of ISIS, want it.
Yeah.
And they want it very badly, and they're willing to fight to the death in order to get it. So we do have a serious problem. I keep trying to get to the White House through, my State Department contacts, and tell them a lie with Bashar Assad, a lie with Iran.
Howard Bloom, always great having you here on the show, my friend. Take care of yourself. Continue the push-ups, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone. Until then, be safe, my friend.
Rob, your pleasure.
Take care, Howard. And X Zone Nation, don't forget the Mohammed Code by our guest this hour. Howard Bloom is available at Amazon.com. His website, www.howardbloom.net. I'll be back on the other side of this news break at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.